priest that had molested 100 kids, and he moved them to some new place where he molested deaf kids.
Le cose che dicono l'associazione dei sordi sono vere? Sono vere queste storie?
For centuries, the Vatican has been shrouded in mystery, but according to Joe Rogan, the truth might be more unsettling than most realize.
That's the dirtiest, most evil practice that the Catholic Church has been accused of.
From secret papal elections to allegations of corruption and hidden archives,
it's pretty fascinating that the Vatican has accumulated such an immense stash of artwork.
No one's allowed in there. You have to be a certain academic and you have to get permission.
And the white smoke came out, and everybody cheered and they went crazy. And then about a half an hour later, black smoke came out. That never in history has that happened.
His discussions dive into the darker side of one of the world's most powerful institutions.
What are they doing? Like the skull and bones and like what kind of rituals of
What kind of
Bohemian Grove?
freak-ass shit are they doing?
But how much of this is fact and how much is just speculation?
The statue is made to represent mankind and the threat of nuclear war. Jesus is seen to be rising above the flames and destruction of a post-nuclear blast.
Let's explore the terrifying claims, the evidence behind them, and the Vatican's own responses.
First, there was an event in the Vatican where they elected John the 23rd in 1958. And there was a very funny thing that happened in the conclave.
Joe Rogan and Mel Gibson exposes the Siri theory and alleged stolen papacy. Joe Rogan's interview with Mel Gibson took an unexpected turn when the conversation landed on one of the most controversial claims about the Vatican: the idea that the Catholic Church, as we know it today, may be a counterfeit institution. At the heart of this claim is the Siri theory, a belief that Cardinal Giuseppe Siri was actually elected Pope in 1958, but was secretly forced to step aside, allowing what some consider a fraudulent Vatican to take control. While this theory might sound like the plot of a political thriller, it has been circulating for decades, particularly among traditionalist Catholics who reject the reforms of the Second Vatican Council.
These things?
I don't think probably.
The central claim of the Siri theory is that during the papal conclave of 1958, Cardinal Siri, a staunch conservative, received the required votes to become pope. According to proponents of this theory, he even chose the papal name Gregory XVII. But before his election could be officially announced, powerful forces, possibly Freemasons, the CIA, or even communist operatives, intervened, pressuring Siri to decline the position. This, they argue, allowed Cardinal Angelo Roncalli to ascend as Pope John XXIII, setting the stage for sweeping, modernizing reforms within the Church.
Funny thing that happened in the conclave. Usually there's white and black smoke that goes out of the chimneys to tell you we have a pope.
Supporters of this theory frequently cite a peculiar event that occurred during the conclave. On October 26, 1958, white smoke briefly billowed from the Sistine Chapel's chimney, the traditional signal that a new pope had been chosen. But then confusion followed. The white smoke turned to black, indicating that no conclusive decision had been made.
And the white smoke came out, and everybody cheered and they went crazy. And then about a half an hour later, black smoke came out. That never in history has that happened.
To believers in the Siri theory, this wasn't just a simple misunderstanding or a technical issue. It was evidence that Siri had been elected and then forced to step aside. Adding fuel to the fire, some claim that in later years, Siri hinted at his hidden status as a suppressed pope. They point to cryptic statements he allegedly made in private conversations, implying that he was unable to speak freely. However, none of these supposed remarks were ever recorded or confirmed, making them difficult to verify. Mel Gibson, a known adherent to traditional Catholicism, sees the Siri theory as proof that the Church was hijacked by modernists after Vatican II.
About what the hell was going on, because there was a lot of stuff I couldn't understand.
Right.
And nobody was really bothering to explain it to me.
His father, Hutton Gibson, was even more outspoken, openly claiming that the current Catholic Church was illegitimate. Mel has continued to express deep skepticism about the Vatican's leadership, particularly in the wake of scandals and doctrinal changes that he believes have deviated from true Catholicism. But is there any real evidence to support these claims? Mainstream Catholic scholars say no. They argue that the confusion over the smoke signals in 1958 was simply due to the Vatican's old-fashioned burning system, which occasionally produced ambiguous results. But what do you think?
A priest that had molested 100 kids, and he moved him to some new place where he molested deaf kids.
Quelle cose che dicono l'associazione dei sordi sono vere? Non sono vere queste
Sì, no,
storie?
veri.
2. The Vatican and child abuse scandals. The Vatican's involvement in child abuse scandals is one of the darkest stains on its history. For decades, cases of priests abusing children were not just ignored, but actively covered up, allowing abusers to continue their crimes while victims were left silenced and traumatized. Investigations across the globe, from the United States and Ireland to Australia and Canada, have uncovered a pattern. Instead of removing predators, church officials quietly transferred them to new parishes, shielding them from legal consequences.
A priest that had molested 100 kids, and he moved him to some new place where he molested deaf kids.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan has repeatedly criticized the Vatican for enabling this system of abuse and secrecy. He has referenced the Spotlight investigation by the Boston Globe, which exposed how the Archdiocese of Boston systematically protected priests accused of abuse.
That's the dirtiest, most evil practice that the Catholic Church has been accused of.
I think so.
The revelations led to the resignation of Cardinal Bernard Law, but Boston was just the tip of the iceberg. Similar stories have emerged from dioceses worldwide, showing a deeply entrenched culture of silence.
When I was 12 or 13, he came to Chile to visit Carolina, and twice he took my sister to Carolina's house. She said he had touched her.
Beyond the individual cases, what makes the scandal even more disturbing is how the Vatican handled the crisis. Internal church documents, some only made public through legal battles, have revealed efforts to suppress evidence, discourage victims from coming forward, and avoid cooperation with law enforcement. In some cases, priests accused of abuse were even promoted, reinforcing the perception that the Vatican prioritized protecting its own reputation over justice. In recent years, Pope Francis and other church leaders have promised reforms, but critics argue these actions have been slow and inadequate. While some priests have been defrocked and legal settlements have been made, many perpetrators have escaped prosecution. Calls for full transparency, such as opening church archives to expose past crimes, have largely been ignored, leaving many to question how much remains hidden. The Vatican's status as a sovereign state with its own legal system has further complicated accountability. Unlike other institutions, it has been able to shield officials from external investigations, limit cooperation with authorities, and use financial settlements to keep cases out of court. This legal and diplomatic power has allowed it to control the narrative while avoiding true consequences.
There are persistent rumors about close links between the Vatican Bank and the mafia.
3. Financial corruption and Vatican Bank scandals. The Vatican Bank, officially known as the Institute for the Works of Religion, IOR, has long been at the center of financial scandals, raising serious questions about corruption within the highest levels of the Catholic Church. Joe Rogan has often pointed to these controversies as evidence that the Vatican operates more like a secretive financial institution than a religious authority.
It's stunning.
Yes, it's huge.
It's so crazy. When you're walking around, you see just the massive amount, just the dollar value in the art that they possess.
While the Church presents itself as a moral guide, the Vatican Bank's history tells a different story, one of money laundering, mafia ties, and financial misconduct stretching back decades. One of the most infamous cases involves Banco Ambrosiano, an Italian bank closely linked to the Vatican. In 1982, its chairman, Roberto Calvi, was found hanging from a bridge in London under suspicious circumstances. Calvi, known as God's banker due to his ties to the Vatican, had been laundering money for organized crime groups, and his sudden death, widely believed to be a murder, sent shockwaves through the financial world. Investigations revealed that the Vatican Bank played a key role in the scandal, acting as a conduit for illegal transactions. Despite overwhelming evidence, Vatican officials denied direct involvement, and the institution avoided any major legal consequences. Beyond the mafia connections, the Vatican Bank has been accused of facilitating money laundering on a global scale. Reports suggest that billions of dollars have moved through its accounts under dubious circumstances, often linked to tax evasion and illicit financial dealings. Unlike traditional banks, the IOR has historically operated with minimal oversight, protected by the Vatican's sovereign status, which allows it to avoid external scrutiny. Joe Rogan has highlighted these financial scandals as part of a broader discussion about the Vatican's secrecy. He has pointed out how, despite various promises of reform, the Church continues to withhold crucial financial information. Efforts to clean up the Vatican Bank have been inconsistent. Several popes, including Pope Francis, have attempted to introduce reforms, but transparency remains limited. While some high-ranking officials have been removed, the underlying system remains largely untouched.
The Vatican of Cardinal Angelo Becciu and others accused of mismanagement of funds.
Another controversy involves the Vatican's investments. It has been revealed that church funds, supposedly meant for charitable causes, have been used for questionable financial ventures, including luxury real estate deals and even Hollywood films that contradict Catholic teachings. These revelations have fueled skepticism about where donations from millions of believers actually go. Despite periodic crackdowns, financial corruption within the Vatican seems to persist. Its vast wealth, combined with its unique legal protections, has allowed it to operate outside the norms of international banking regulations. As scandals continue to surface, the question remains whether real accountability will ever be enforced, or if the Vatican will continue to protect its financial empire under a veil of secrecy.
I'm sure that there's some really exciting stuff in the secret archive, and which historian wouldn't want to have the key to it?
4. The Vatican's secret archives. What's inside?
It's pretty fascinating that the Vatican has accumulated such an immense stash of artwork.
No one's allowed in there. You have to be a certain academic and you have to get permission.
The Vatican's secret archives have long been a source of speculation, fueling countless conspiracy theories about what might be hidden within its heavily guarded walls. Stretching over 50 miles of shelving, these archives contain centuries' worth of documents, correspondence, and historical records, many of which remain inaccessible to the public.
Have 53 miles of shelf space within that archive.
Joe Rogan has frequently referenced these archives on his podcast, discussing theories that they hold explosive information from lost biblical texts to evidence of extraterrestrial life.
It's like your serpent's head. It's crazy stuff.
Have you
dude.
been?
No, but I've seen it on YouTube.
You been to Italy yet?
No.
You should go, dude. It is insane.
You went into the Vatican?
Yeah, it's amazing.
While some claims are purely speculative, the Vatican's extreme secrecy has only added to the intrigue. One of the most widely debated topics is whether the archives contain documents that could challenge core Christian beliefs.
Mount Graham is one of the biggest secrets of the Vatican today. And the reason that I think that is I don't think it's all about just the science. I believe that the Vatican believes that when Jesus returns, he will return as an alien being.
Some theorists suggest that hidden texts might contradict the official narrative of the Church, potentially shedding light on early Christianity in ways that the Vatican prefers to keep quiet. Others speculate that lost Gospels, early church rulings, or even suppressed scientific discoveries could be buried in these vaults. Rogan has entertained discussions about whether these records might contain proof that key aspects of religious doctrine were altered over time to consolidate power. Another controversial theory suggests that the Vatican is hiding knowledge of extraterrestrial encounters. Some claim that ancient texts or records of unexplained events could provide evidence that the Church has long been aware of alien life. While no credible proof supports this, the secrecy surrounding the archives leaves room for wild interpretations. Rogan has discussed how organizations with immense influence, like the Vatican, may control information to maintain authority, and the archives are often cited as an example of this. In reality, the Vatican has begun releasing some historical documents in recent years, particularly those related to World War II and Pope Pius XII's role during the Holocaust.
A series of recently opened Vatican archives are shedding new light on the relationship between Pope Pius XII and Adolf Hitler.
However, access remains strictly controlled. Scholars must obtain special permission and can only request specific documents rather than browsing freely.
No one's allowed in there. You have to be a certain academic and you have to get permission, so you can't just go browse it. You have to specifically request what you want to look at.
This level of restriction continues to raise suspicions. If there's nothing to hide, why not allow full transparency?
Just 33 days in office, John Paul I was dead. It announced that he died of a massive heart attack. Pope John Paul I was thought to be in perfect health when he was elected, so wasn't there something suspicious about his sudden death?
5. The case of Pope John Paul I's mysterious death. Joe Rogan has never been one to shy away from discussing mysterious deaths, and the case of Pope John Paul I is one that fits right into the kind of conspiracies he loves to explore. On his podcast, he has referenced theories surrounding the sudden and unexpected death of the Pope, who reigned for just 33 days before being found dead in his bed on September 28, 1978. Officially, the Vatican claimed he died of a heart attack, but the circumstances surrounding his passing have led many to believe something more sinister was at play.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. Yeah, horrific shit. That process of moving people.
Rogan has highlighted how the Vatican's handling of the situation only fueled suspicions. No autopsy was performed, despite the unusual nature of his death. Instead, the Vatican rushed to embalm the body within 24 hours, limiting any further investigation. Adding to the intrigue, conflicting reports emerged about how he was found. Some say his body was discovered clutching documents related to a corruption probe into the Vatican bank, while others claim key witnesses changed their stories over time. The financial angle is what makes this case particularly compelling. Before his death, Pope John Paul I was reportedly planning to reform the Vatican bank, which had been linked to money laundering and shady dealings with the mafia. His sudden passing meant that those reforms never happened. This has led some to believe he was silenced before he could expose financial misconduct at the highest levels of the church. Rogan, like many conspiracy theorists, has questioned whether this was a case of natural causes or something much darker. Could the Vatican, fearing exposure, have eliminated a pope who threatened its financial empire? While no definitive proof exists, the secrecy surrounding the case has kept these theories alive for decades. Even Pope Francis, years later, admitted that there was a mystery to John Paul I's death, though he stopped short of endorsing any foul play theories.
The problem is that Mael de Lupe needs the authorization of the church, but apparently one of their bishops joining Hitler's side does not pose any problem.
6. The Vatican and World War II Nazi escape routes. Joe Rogan has often talked about how powerful institutions rewrite history to protect themselves, and one of the most controversial topics tied to the Vatican is its alleged role in helping Nazi war criminals escape justice after World War II. On his podcast, Rogan has referenced the Rat Lines, a network of secret escape routes that allowed high-ranking Nazis to flee Europe, many of them finding refuge in South America. What makes this story even more disturbing is the evidence suggesting that the Vatican was directly involved in helping them disappear. After the fall of the Third Reich, figures like Adolf Eichmann, the architect of the Holocaust, and Josef Mengele, the infamous Angel of Death from Auschwitz, managed to escape to Argentina, Brazil, and other countries. These criminals didn't just slip through the cracks, they were given false passports and protected by sympathetic figures within the Catholic Church. Declassified documents reveal that the Vatican played a key role in facilitating these escapes, using its influence to provide fake identification papers through the Red Cross and sheltering war criminals under the guise of aiding refugees. Rogan has pointed out how the Vatican's status as a sovereign state gave it the perfect cover. Unlike other institutions, it wasn't answerable to outside governments, allowing it to operate without oversight. Some church officials justified their actions by claiming they were helping anti-communist forces. Since the Cold War was already brewing, the Vatican saw communism as the greater enemy. But was it really about ideology, or was the church protecting people who had deep connections to its financial and political networks? One of the most damning cases is that of Bishop Alois Hudal, an Austrian cleric and Nazi sympathizer who openly admitted to helping Nazis escape. He believed that many SS officers were good Catholics who deserved protection. Hudal personally arranged for war criminals to receive Vatican-issued travel documents, allowing them to flee to South America and evade prosecution. Despite this, the Church has never fully acknowledged the extent of its involvement. 7. The bizarre exorcism industry. Joe Rogan has always been fascinated by the strange and unexplained, and one topic that frequently comes up in his discussions about the Vatican is exorcism. He's brought up how, despite the modern world moving towards science and psychology, the Catholic Church still heavily invests in exorcisms, maintaining a whole system dedicated to the ritual of casting out demons. But what's even more bizarre is that the Vatican has actually expanded its exorcism operations in recent years, training more priests to battle what it claims is a growing rise in demonic possession. On his podcast, Rogan has questioned whether this is real or just an elaborate show to maintain power over its followers. After all, exorcisms used to be rare, but now the Vatican reportedly performs tens of thousands of them every year. In 2018, the church even hosted a week-long exorcism training course, drawing in hundreds of priests eager to learn how to expel demons. If demonic possession is real, why is it seemingly happening more often in the 21st century than in medieval times? Could it be that the church is using exorcisms as a way to reinforce its authority in a world that's becoming increasingly skeptical of religion? One of the most infamous figures in this realm was Father Gabriele Amorth, the Vatican's former chief exorcist, who claimed to have performed over 70,000 exorcisms during his lifetime. He frequently spoke of the devil's presence inside the Vatican itself, an idea that Rogan has brought up with guests who speculate about the church's deeper secrets. Amorth even alleged that high-ranking church officials were involved in satanic rituals, which of course only added fuel to the fire of conspiracy theories. Rogan has also pointed out the psychological side of exorcisms, discussing whether what the church calls possession is often just undiagnosed mental illness. Modern psychiatry explains that many reported symptoms of possession, violent outbursts, speaking in different voices, even seizures, can be linked to conditions like schizophrenia, dissociative identity disorder, or epilepsy. Yet, instead of directing people toward medical treatment, the Vatican still offers exorcisms as a solution. Then there's the money aspect. The growing demand for exorcisms has turned it into a multi-million-dollar industry, with private exorcists charging hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars for their services. Some cases have even led to tragic outcomes where people seeking help for demonic possession have died due to brutal exorcism practices. 8. The missing books of the Bible. Joe Rogan has always been intrigued by hidden history, and one of the biggest mysteries surrounding the Vatican is the missing books of the Bible. On his podcast, he has questioned why certain ancient texts, once considered part of religious teachings, were later removed, raising the possibility that these books contained ideas the church didn't want people to see. If the Bible is supposed to be the ultimate word of God, why did men have the power to edit it? Many of these missing books are known as the Apocrypha, which includes texts like the Book of Enoch, the Gospel of Thomas, the Wisdom of Solomon, and the Book of Jubilees. These writings were once part of early Christian teachings but were later excluded when the Bible was officially compiled. Rogan has discussed how the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, under Emperor Constantine, played a crucial role in shaping what made it into the official version of Christianity. This raises the question, was the final version of the Bible shaped by spiritual truth or by political motives? One of the most intriguing lost books is the Book of Enoch, which describes a world where angels came down to earth, took human wives, and created a race of giants called the Nephilim. Some believe this book was removed because it portrays a more complex supernatural world that didn't fit neatly into the church's evolving doctrine. Rogan has entertained theories that this text might even connect to ancient alien stories, as it describes beings descending from the heavens with advanced knowledge, something eerily similar to modern UFO theories. Nah. Another key text, the Gospel of Thomas, contains teachings of Jesus that are very different from what is found in the New Testament. Instead of focusing on worshiping an external church, this gospel emphasizes self-discovery and inner enlightenment. Some speculate that this book was removed because it threatened the authority of organized religion. If people believed they could connect with God directly, they wouldn't need priests or the institutional church. 9 occult symbols and alleged satanic imagery in the Vatican. Joe Rogan has always been drawn to hidden symbols and secret meanings, and when it comes to the Vatican, the idea that occult imagery is hidden in plain sight is something that has sparked intense discussions on his podcast. While the Catholic Church presents itself as the moral authority of the world, there are unsettling symbols embedded in its architecture and artwork that have led some to question whether something darker is lurking beneath the surface.
What are they doing? Like the skull and bones and what kind of rituals of Bohemian Grove?
Shit are they doing?
Could the Vatican, the very heart of Christianity, be hiding satanic influences in plain sight? One of the most talked about examples is the resurrection sculpture inside the Vatican's Paul VI Audience Hall. This massive bronze sculpture, meant to depict Jesus rising from a nuclear apocalypse, looks anything but holy.
The statue is made to represent mankind and the threat of nuclear war. Jesus is seen to be rising above the flames and destruction of a post-nuclear blast.
Instead of a peaceful or divine image, it features a twisted, almost skeletal Christ figure emerging from chaotic flames, surrounded by warped figures. Many have pointed out its eerie resemblance to demonic imagery, with some going so far as to claim it was intentionally designed to reflect something sinister. Rogan has discussed how people see patterns in architecture and art, but when so many disturbing designs exist in one place, it raises real questions. Then there's the Vatican's audience hall itself, which from a certain angle looks strikingly like a serpent's head, complete with 2 eyes, fangs, and a mouth, where the Pope gives speeches. Whether intentional or not, the symbolism is undeniable. In Christianity, the serpent is one of the most well-known symbols of Satan, dating back to the Garden of Eden. The fact that the Pope addresses audiences from what appears to be inside the mouth of a serpent has fueled theories that the Vatican is sending hidden messages about its true allegiance. Rogan has also referenced claims that hidden Freemasonic and pagan symbols exist within Vatican City, particularly in St. Peter's Basilica and its surrounding structures. Some researchers argue that elements of Egyptian and Babylonian sun worship, symbols long associated with occult practices, are woven into the very design of the Vatican's monuments. The obelisk at St. Peter's Square, for example, is an ancient Egyptian artifact originally erected in Heliopolis, a city dedicated to sun worship. While the Church claims it was simply repurposed, theorists see it as evidence that pre-Christian influences still hold power within the Vatican. 10. The Vatican, UFOs, and the Lucifer Telescope. Joe Rogan has never been shy about discussing UFOs and hidden government secrets, but what really gets people talking is when those mysteries intersect with the Vatican.
I know.
That would be hilarious.
And then they built this telescope called Lucifer to look for alien life.
On his podcast, he has entertained the idea that the Church, despite its historical resistance to modern science, may actually know a lot more about extraterrestrial life than it lets on. One of the biggest clues? The Vatican's deep involvement in astronomical research, specifically its connection to a telescope with an eyebrow-raising name, Lucifer. Yes, you read that right. The Vatican is involved in a major space observatory, and one of the key instruments used in this research was called LUCIFER, a near-infrared camera attached to the Large Binocular Telescope, LBT, in Arizona. Though the name was technically an acronym, Large Binocular Telescope, Near Infrared Utility with Camera, and Integral Field Unit for Extragalactic Research, the irony of the Catholic Church using a tool called Lucifer to study the cosmos wasn't lost on Rogan or his audience. It led to speculation. Why is the Vatican so interested in deep space observation? What exactly are they looking for?
Imagine being a part of a gigantic religious institution and naming a telescope. You could say like the God Eye. You can call it the God Eye.
Yes. How did that one? Can you imagine the meeting where the top 3 names were like, okay, we got.
Rogan has brought up the possibility that the Church might have inside knowledge about extraterrestrial life, or at the very least a vested interest in how such discoveries would impact religious belief.
The Catholic Church, for a very long time, would not acknowledge.
Some theorists argue that the Vatican is watching for something significant, perhaps even waiting for alien contact. Others suggest that ancient texts hidden in the Vatican archives may contain references to extraterrestrial beings that were reinterpreted as angels or divine messengers. Adding fuel to the fire, several high-ranking Vatican astronomers have made surprisingly open statements about the possibility of alien life. Father Jose Funes, former head of the Vatican Observatory, has said that belief in aliens does not contradict Christianity, and that extraterrestrial beings, if they exist, could also be considered children of God. Similarly, Father Guy Consolmagno, another Vatican scientist, once joked about the idea of baptizing aliens if they ever made contact. While these statements may seem lighthearted, they reveal that the Vatican has given serious thought to the implications of intelligent life beyond Earth. Rogan has also discussed the broader question,
wow, Lucifer Telescope, how kooky.
I know.
Of why religious institutions would want to control knowledge about extraterrestrials.
That is both primitive and warlike, and yet insanely technologically advanced.
11th, the third secret of Fatima. Vatican cover-up. Joe Rogan has always been drawn to mysteries that seem deliberately hidden from the public, and the Third Secret of Fatima is one of the most controversial Vatican cover-ups in modern history.
And he moved one to a place where they molested 100 deaf kids.
On his podcast, Rogan has referenced this event as an example of how powerful institutions control information, questioning why the Vatican kept a supposed divine revelation locked away for more than 80 years before selectively revealing parts of it. The story begins in 1917 when 3 Portuguese shepherd children claimed to receive prophecies from the Virgin Mary. The first 2 secrets predicted World War II and the rise of communism, but the third secret was deemed too sensitive to be released. The Vatican finally made an official statement about it in 2000, saying it contained a vision of a bishop in white being assassinated, which they linked to the 1981 attempt on Pope John Paul II's life. 12. The Vatican's political power and influence. Joe Rogan has often discussed how unelected elites shape global politics, and few institutions wield as much behind-the-scenes influence as the Vatican. Despite its tiny size, the Holy See operates as a sovereign entity, meaning it has its own diplomats, negotiates treaties, and holds influence over world affairs in ways that most religious organizations can't. The Vatican's diplomatic network spans the globe, with over 180 countries maintaining formal relations with the Holy See. Its representatives, known as nuncios, operate almost like ambassadors, playing a quiet but powerful role in international negotiations. Whether it's mediating conflicts, influencing political decisions, or lobbying for religious policies, the Vatican has access to world leaders that few other institutions can match.
One, first to be given the pallium twice in the country.
One of the biggest questions Rogan has raised is why the Vatican refuses to declassify many of its records. What political deals have been made behind closed doors? If the Vatican truly has nothing to hide, why isn't it more transparent? Hypocrisy and scandals in Vatican leadership. For an institution that preaches morality and holiness, the Vatican has been plagued by scandals that suggest a different reality behind closed doors. Joe Rogan has repeatedly highlighted the hypocrisy of church leaders, discussing everything from financial corruption to secret relationships that directly contradict Catholic teachings. Rogan has pointed out how these stories reveal a double standard. The Vatican holds its followers to strict moral guidelines, while many of its own leaders break those same rules. Then there's the financial aspect. While the Church asks believers for donations, Vatican officials have been caught investing in luxury real estate, funding controversial films, and misusing charitable funds. Rogan has questioned how an institution built on faith can justify acting like a multinational corporation with a history of shady dealings. So what do you think? Does the Vatican hold dark secrets? Let us know in the comments below.